Please proceed.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members and staff. I am Ditas Katagi. I'm the director of the Complete Count Census 2020. This will be my third decennial census in this role. As you may be aware, in the 2000 effort, the state made a significant investment in outreach to support this federal operation. The lessons learned about that effective outreach has carried through even 2 decades later. We really are going to be focused around a coordinated effort, cross-sectorial, which will engage at the local level trusted messengers, putting questionnaire assistance centers in the right places at the right time, staffed with the right people, and doing a multilingual, micro-targeted, multimedia outreach campaign. This proposal that you're looking at was initially drafted fall of last year and did not imagine the additional barriers we are now facing across the country, which may impact the ability of the U.S. Census Bureau to collect and complete an accurate count across the nation, but mainly here in California. So I am here today to discuss the administration's proposal requesting $40.3 million and 22 limited-term positions to staff the California Complete Count effort to complement the U.S. Census Bureau's outreach, focusing on hard-to-count populations. This proposal requests the funding to be appropriated in 2018-19 and available for the duration of the 3-year effort, crossing over fiscal years 2018-19, 2019 to 2020, and 2020 to 21. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Finance?
Thank you. Rebecca Kirk, Department of Finance. The $40.3 million included in the governor's budget, combined with $10 million provided in the current year, represents our best estimate of the funds necessary to aid in a complete count of California residents. We do acknowledge that there is some uncertainty as the funds necessary depend on U.S. Census Bureau actions, the outcome of litigation regarding the inclusion of a citizenship question on the census questionnaire, and future costs of media advertising. We look forward to continuing discussions with committee staff and stakeholders regarding the census effort.
LAO?
Carolyn Chu, Legislative Analyst's Office. Given the substantial impact of the census and the count in California on federal funding received by California, we do believe that a state outreach effort is in the state's fiscal interest.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. How many staff do you have in place at this time?
So the Complete Count Census 2020 office has filled 4 positions out of the 6 that were approved for this fiscal year. They include myself, the director. I have my deputy director, my assistant director of marketing and communications, and our office manager and Complete Count committee liaison. They're just sitting there in the second row. The timeline to hire the 2 additional positions, which are the Assistant Director of External Media Relations and the Assistant Director of Outreach position, is within 60 days. We are aggressively recruiting these positions and have conducted some interviews, and the positions are currently advertised on CalHR, their website, the Capital Morning Report, and on other governmental websites. So that's for this year.
Okay. How are you going to set up the proposed contracts with the community-based organizations, given the small size of your team?
So we have, in the proposal moving forward, it's 16 additional spots, so a total of 22. So we have decided to divide up a piece of those that will fall under our deputy director for contract management. It is very important that we do contracts and not grants to ensure the accountability. Also under our director of outreach, we'll have regional outreach managers who won't just be doing outreach, but they're actually providing that second layer of accountability, because they'll have to review all the plans of the administrative community-based organizations and how they are spending it down on the ground.
In your mind, is that sufficient staffing?
The 22?
Yes.
In 2000, we had 55 staff.
So is that, I'd take that as a no then.
I think with the added barriers that we're facing, I think for the $40 million, we could probably do it.
It's okay to say no.
So we always
you're amongst
support,
friends here.
Yes, we always support more staff because it is a big job. The more we go out into the community and the more we're hearing about the fear that's out there.
That was good dancing around that. Who's going to administer and monitor the proposed contracts with the community organizations?
So we are dividing the state up. The Demographics Research Unit at DOF has divided the state up into 11 regions. In 2000, I'm not sure how many regions we had there, but we also had what we called administrative CBOs, which are basically, they could be foundations. We use the LA Urban League, for example, down in Los Angeles. These are really community, NGOs, community organizations that have capacity to reach into the audience that we're trying to reach, the hard to count populations, but they will be doing pretty much the administrative task of monitoring and making sure that the boots on the ground are doing what they say they're doing.
I've just got just a couple more questions. How can we ensure that the infrastructure for the census is in place by next year?
So we have a plan for the 16 additional positions, contingent their appointments, and so contingent upon the budget approval. We will be posting those right away in terms of we have to go through the Cal HR hiring process. So, and recruitment, we're looking for great people. So the more you can tell people to come aboard.
Thank you. Ms. Caballero, any questions?
No questions, just comments. I think this particular census cycle is going to be more difficult than in previous years. And I want to caution that part of what's happened in my district is that because of the number of families that have, for lack of a better word, mixed immigration status, they've been told not to answer doors and not to give any information out, and to be very wary of anybody coming asking for information. So we're going to really have a very difficult time getting good answers. And part of the challenge in the region as well is that there are multiple families living in one-bedroom and two-bedroom apartments. So you may end up getting one person that lives in the apartment, but unless they give you the information on everybody, and that a study was just done recently, was just released last week on farm worker housing, and showed that a large percentage of the individuals living in our residences are living with they're not family members. In other words, they're renting the space, but they're not blood related. And so we have a tremendous task, and we're going to have a hard time getting information unless we can get the trust of the community. So I want to work with you. It may make sense to include the legislature in whatever plans that you utilize so that we can get as much done electronically, so no one's going out to people's houses. And so I want to be helpful in that process. So I know that you're going to be putting all that into the framework that we have to work from. But the more that we can get the message out that we need this information, it's not so that people can be picked up and deported, but so that they can be counted, and that's the way that we get resources from the federal government, and we've got to make that clear.
Absolutely.
So thank you for being here today. And
we'll be in your district on the 31st,
Great.
in May and Salinas.
I just want to echo on Mrs. Caballero's comments, and that's true. We want to see this stand up as soon as possible. We want to be involved and help. We've talked about it at length amongst the members in our caucus, with staff. We've discussed it yesterday at length, and it's important, that undercount. We don't want our immigrants afraid. And obviously, California stands to lose a lot of funding. We want to make sure that does not happen. So we want to do as much as we can to assure folks that we need the information. This helps California, helps us all. So at this point, I'm going to open up to public comment. So those desiring to speak, please come forward. It's okay to say me too. We know we need to fund this more, and we're supportive of it. So we're going to make this happen. So we've got a fairly lengthy agenda, so please be brief in your comments.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Joseph Villela, Director of Policy with CHIRLA, the Coalition for Human Immigrant Rights. CHIRLA is part of the Census Policy Advocacy Network, a collaborative effort among multiple organizations across the sector. We support the notion of increasing funding for the census, especially to those organizations that have trusted, have gained the trust of immigrant communities, to make sure that we have a field plan for them. In regards to the electronic model that the census is moving forward, we're a little bit concerned given that a lot of communities of color do not have access to those services. So we want to make sure that in combination of that plan to take that in consideration. In addition to that, CHIRLA has different offices in San Bernardino, the Central Valley, in LA, and so we also want to make sure that there's different plans from different regions, given that not all site fields all. And with that, we respectfully request for more funding, specifically for outreach and education for those hard-to-reach organizations marginalized individuals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members. Martha Guerrero, representing the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors in support of the budget allocation of the $40.3 million and also an additional $8.7 million specific for Los Angeles County. We are the hardest to survey county in the nation. Nearly 45% of the county's households are in hard-to-survey census tracts, which makes the county highly vulnerable to an undercount. The calculation as well for this figure was made before the Department of Commerce decision to include a question on citizenship on the census form. We need to accurately put that information down in order for the census to be counted. That's why it is imperative that we include all the additional funding. The county's greatest assets in the census effort is our existing infrastructure, like the county libraries and facilities, and the ability to reach our existing clients that is getting access to our services. And they have a relationship, our clients have a relationship with our county employees and in our facilities. The census effort is in partnership also with our local governments, 88 cities and 140 unincorporated areas, and the community-based organizations who have strong ties with their respective communities. The county would utilize funds from the local CCC's allocation to support the local region-wide education and outreach campaign. Not only does the county work collectively with the CBOs to ensure and support their efforts in the local communities, but we also fill in the gaps for other groups that do not fall within the reach of our CBO partners. Such groups include the elderly, disabled, renters, individuals living in crowded households, such as what you mentioned, Assemblymember Caballero, and individuals living in rural areas like Antelope Valley, for example, the homeless, those in the higher education system, the military veterans, and businesses, amongst others. The county relies on the census-derived statistics as the basis for federal funding allocations for programs that serve vulnerable residents, such as Medicaid, foster care assistance, temporary assistance for needy families, and Section 8 housing. Therefore, and also one more thing, just to reference what the reduction looks like, I provided a couple of charts on demonstrating the significant cut of the access to census information by the federal resources that were previously provided, so you can see the difference. So therefore, we urge your support for the additional funding that we are requesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
I, Ingram ACLU of California, in strong support of increased funding for community-based organizations to do census outreach to ensure we get an accurate count and California gets its full share of federal safety net programs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Santosh Siram Santana, representing Chinese for Affirmative Action. We are a civil rights community-based organization. And since our founding in 1969, we have been involved in every census for the last 5 decades. Our commitment to the census is constant. It's to ensure a fair and accurate count for our hard-to-reach communities. All of this experience has really taught us many lessons, but the key lesson is that Census 2020 will be lost or won at the local level. And for us to win, we believe there are 3 crucial components that need to be in place. First, we're asking the legislature to increase the funding for community-based organization outreach. The research shows and our experience shows that the hard-to-reach communities, especially the immigrant community, really see the community-based organizations as trusted messengers, and we would ask for their role to be funded more. Second, California really needs a language access plan for this to be done right, and we're delighted and happy to see the staff recommendations to have such a plan. But I would also ask that in such a plan, for it to be meaningful and robust, that small language groups are included, non-written languages are included, and addressing languages for geographically concentrated communities. There's also a national advisory group for the census who has provided recommendations in November 2016 on language access and the hard to reach. And we believe that report has many key elements for a California state plan. And third, we think it's really crucial that a CBO infrastructure to roll out census is in place soon. The organizations that service the hard to reach need to be able to ramp up before the next fiscal year starts. And they need to know that those dollars are coming so they can plan early, scale up, hire and train the appropriate staff, which are all census best practices. We thank you so much for your time.
Okay, since we're talking about issue 3, we'll go ahead, if you have comments on that, go ahead and include that now for the other folks.
Okay, Mr. Chair, and Assembly Member Ana Caballero, Khadija Alam Javed with Advancement Project California, representing the Census Policy Advocacy Network here today. We're a network of statewide organizations working towards a fair and accurate census in 2020, representing many hard-to-count communities. First of all, I want to thank this committee for an augmentation of funding for a census budget in the last year's budget. And I also want to share a tremendous amount of gratitude to the governor's office for including a $40.3 million proposal in this year's budget. This leadership is needed because California has a lot to lose in the new political climate on the federal level. California is intentionally being undermined and attacked, and Census 2020 is one avenue in which it's being done so. We're pleased to see the governor's proposal. However, we believe it's not enough funding. The state should and need to invest a lot more than $40.3 million proposed. This is especially true for community-based organizations. The network did an analysis of just how much it would cost CBOs to do outreach using various methods that have been used in the past and will be used in Census 2020. And for instance, just an example, just looking at the Latino population, our numbers exceeded the $12.5 million allocated in the governor's proposal. We believe it's going to cost around $21 million to reach hard-to-count populations tracts within Latino community. And we have about 8 to 9 different HTC populations. This is not even including the complications of the citizenship question. Having said that, we're not proposing a hard budget ask today because we want to continue working with you and the leadership and the administration in landing a comprehensive approach and amount for this effort. And we want to provide analysis for you to do that. It is too important for California to undermine the budget for census. Undermining census funding will mean undermining California, something we cannot afford to do. It is not just what we want, it is what is necessary. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to working with you.
So let me say this. This budget staff up here has worked on this for a long time, working with the Speaker's office and Budget Chair Ting. $40 million is a starting point. It is far insufficient to fund this. So it's okay to say me too. We're all in agreement. We've got a long hearing, so brevity would be much appreciated. Please.
Andrew Medina of Asian Americans Advancing Justice California, also part of the Census Policy Advocacy Network. Strong support of additional augmentation.
Thank you. Perfect.
Yanina Casillas with the Council on American Islamic Relations, California, the nation's largest Muslim civil rights group, also in strong support.
Thank you.
Josefina Ramirez Natsana with Children Now, also in strong support of the item because children living in families, and for the item that Ms. Caballero spoke up, really strong support.
Thank you.
Eddie Carmona with Pico, California, the largest grassroots faith-based organizing network in the state of California, also a member of the Census Policy Advocacy Network, also in strong support.
Thank you.
Joe Michael, Equality California. We are also a member of the Census Policy Advocacy Network, and LGBTQ folks are members of many other communities, and that's why it's tremendously important to us to make sure LGBTQ folks are counted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Jennifer Fearing on behalf of the California Association of Nonprofits and on behalf of our more than 10,000 members, we stand aligned with those from the Policy Network who have expressed a desire for continued conversations and significantly more outreach funding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Noé Paramo with California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation. We serve low-income rural farm worker communities throughout the state. We are here in support of additional funding for the community-based organizations to provide meaningful outreach and education. Secondly, we're in support of OPR, the Office of Planning and Research, to have a language access plan by April 2019. We look forward to working with the staff and all those involved with the census and the legislature going forward. Thank you very much.
Christopher Galliano from the California Immigrant Policy Center. We are in support of more funding to community-based organizations, as well as intentionally laying out the challenges and addressing language access as it relates to this ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Efraín Escobedo with California Community Foundation, here on behalf of LA and Sync, a cross-sector collaborative in LA in strong support of budget augmentation and the prioritization of hard-to-count communities, and also here to extend to the legislature that in 2010, it was a partnership between philanthropy and our state leaders that really helped make a difference, and we're here to stand ready and extend our interest in being partners in this.
Thank you.
Andrea Herrera with MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, also in strong support with an emphasis on developing a language access plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair and members, Alejandra Duran, representing Next Gen California, in strong support.
Thank you. So the recommendations hold this item open, so we're going to hold it open. And next, oh. So we've kind of covered item 3, the census outreach language access. So for the folks that testified earlier in public comment, I told them to go ahead and include that. Mr. Chu?
I just, and my apologies, it's one of those afternoons, but I understand there's already been some discussion on what the administration's plan is to develop a language access program.
I can talk further about it if you
Actually,
like.
if you wouldn't mind, just a quick summary.
Absolutely. So,
Sure.
A language access coordinator position has been identified, and will be hired to assist with language support. So the position will also be monitoring and auditing, and the language access coordinator will participate on the language strategic vision, as language access is critical and important to this campaign. So as part of the ground strategy, these community-based organizations will have contract requirements addressing their language and cultural competencies that will be deployed at the ground level. So we'll have one person to do that, to also work on the report for item 3, but also within our regional outreach managers, they all will have that hat as well. So they have like an official coordinator, and then across all contracting with community-based organizations and also with the counties, there will be a language access component of which they need to load up in their plan before they get any state dollars.
And are you going to be putting out a more detailed plan on this? Can we expect to have more information that the public will be able to understand about what's going on?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
We have our statewide outreach and communication strategy is, the first draft is when we complete the convenings, will be due October 1st.
Great.
To the complete count committee.
Well, it goes without saying that I have a significant interest in this, given the diversity of our state when it comes to language access, and I think anything that we can do to encourage as fully fleshed out and as comprehensive a plan as possible, we would appreciate. And then the second question is around census outreach. Obviously, we appreciate what the administration has initially proposed for census, but I think there is certainly a sense around the state that we need to devote more funding to census outreach, particularly given what the Trump administration has suggested. My guess is you've talked about this a bit, but what sort of a plan at this point do you have around census outreach?
Well, according to the budget, we're going to be doing both an air game and a ground game. And the ground game, of course, is the administrative and the community-based organizations. The air game is really to provide that surround sound. It's changed a lot in terms of media and advertising since 2010 alone, and using social media and using a lot of the other digital advertising that are more micro-targeted. But we also have school outreach that we're doing because, of course, you know that students can be, particularly in limited English proficient households, can be really key messengers, and sometimes they actually end up filling out those forms. We also have caseworker outreach, which in 2000 and 2010, we worked with the Women, Infants, and Children's programs. It's kind of just to give you an example of working with localities and identifying caseworker specific, because these people serve those communities that are hardest to count, and they have time with them. In particular, the Women, Infants, and Children's program, they have 10 to 20 minutes each month where they meet with these young mothers and educate them about nutrition. But we can also, we've used it in the past decennial census to where they can educate them about how to fill out the form and why it's so important. We also have a couple other components, sector outreach, and our state agency working group, which we did in both 2000 and 2010, because many of our state agencies, the controller's office, the DMV, some of the social services, they are right there on the ground level in terms of service provision. They may not be exactly the most trusted messengers. I would think that community-based organizations are, but they can also provide that surround sound about why it's so important and why services can be impacted if they're not counted.
I'll just make the comment that, again, while I appreciate what has been proposed thus far, I think we have a ways to go before I'm going to feel comfortable that we have enough money invested to adequately ensure that we're counting everybody, particularly when it comes to census outreach. And I'm also of the perspective that it is folks on the ground who can help us as a state do the best job of counting everyone. So to the chair and to our colleagues, I certainly hope in the coming weeks we will be able to have more of a conversation of what that adequate amount is. I know there's been a lot of discussion among diverse stakeholders outside this building, but also between the administration and our Assembly Select Committee on the Census, this subcommittee and others, and I hope that in the next couple of weeks we can all get on the same page on what that looks like.
I look forward to it.
Great, thanks.
And following up on Mr. Chu's comment, the tough part is you have half the staff you had during the last census. And with the climate today in Washington and folks being, genuinely scared to report, that's a frustrating part with the state because agencies that need and should ask for money or augmentations don't because they're told by the bosses. It's just how it's done in the state. And that is BS. That is BS, having half the staff. You weren't here earlier, Mr. Chu, but they have 22 staff, and prior they had 55.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'll reiterate the BS part of what you just said.
Thank you. Amen, brother. And that's the frustrating because we're in tough time. This is money in California. That if we don't get the correct census, we lose. We all lose. So it's like I'm all for giving as many positions as you need to get an adequate count. And that's really just the frustrating part with the governor's office. This is frustrating. Fund it adequately so we can get the best count we can. And that's just, I'll just leave it at that. Obviously, we don't have a quorum right here, so we can't vote on this.
I think there's a response from DOF.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may. Thank you. Broadly speaking, in regards to the census item, just wanted to mention that the funding and the position count that's included in this request, combined with the contracted community-based organization resources that would be used, they do represent our best estimate. We do acknowledge that there's some uncertainty given this effort. We do, of course, acknowledge the importance of the census to California and its broader impacts, and we look forward to continuing conversations with committee staff and stakeholders regarding the census.
Thank you.
I think maybe one thing I would just say in addition to what the chair just said, I think we all appreciate the importance of the census, and I do think the first amount that was suggested in the January budget was a good step in the right direction. But we're in a different world right now. None of us expected that citizenship question would actually become part of this, and whether the right answer to what we spend on the budget is double what we have or 5 times what we have, I think we need to be thinking in terms of an order of magnitude. Because if we get this wrong, I think we all know the consequences of what that's going to mean for us for a decade, if not more. So I will certainly be open to supporting a much significant augmentation in this, and certainly to the budget staff and leadership as we think about it. I very much hope that we put a much bigger number with a real portion of that going to outreach.
Thank you.